Hello and welcome into episode number 97 of Pod by the fucking River. I'm your host, Hogdale. I'm joined today by my good friend Ed Hand. By the way, noted, presented by Beyond the Monster and Chris Henrik's beautiful face. Just got to get that out there. You know, Ed sometimes likes to skirt the fact that we are indeed presented by the Beyond the Monster. He's been better recently, but I still like to throw shots at him because fuck it, why not?
Because bullying works.
Bullying is effective. You know, people don't talk about it enough. Sometimes you got to shove someone into a locker. And we're joined today by a very special guest, Sox beat writer extraordinaire, well respected in the community. Like, I don't know too many people who don't like him. It's Chris Cotillo.
Just
Chris,
the
how you doing, man?
not on here. I'm good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. I'm vibing.
You know what? I'll start with this. After all the the Red Sox beat bashing on this show throughout spring training, the first call I should make is to the Dropkick Murphys for a copyright lawyer after the intro, because that is shut down in 1 second.
No, we're fucked now. We're screwed. Mm-hmm. We're screwed. We've been lawyered here, and I'm gonna go.
Yeah. The thing is like,
this has been Pod by the River. Thanks for coming out.
And so we've been taking them down by DMCA. Time to go fucking hop in the river and find some other shit to do. Yeah, man, good to have you on. I have a reputation of despising the media, which isn't true. There's only a few media members that I truly hate. Dan Shaughnessy. And listen, I've heard Dan Shaughnessy's the nicest guy ever, and that might be true. I could absolutely believe that. Same with Tony Maserati. Probably a really cool guy. I've heard nothing but good things about him behind the scenes. But, obviously, Chris, you contacted me after the Devers thing. I think it was immediately after that. Got in contact with me, follow me, which, by the way, appreciate the follow finally. Yes. I've been following you for years.
Long overdue. My bad.
Don't worry about it, man. I'm not the fucking center of the universe. I'm just some guy, some asshole on the internet. But I'd like you to get your side out here, Chris. How do you feel about how the carte blanche bashing of the media post the Rafael Devers interview or session? I don't know what the hell I call it.
Yeah, no, it was it was an interesting day. I think that generally the beat is in a spot where, we have this immense privilege of having the access that the fans don't. And so the goal every day should be asking the questions the fans would want answered. That's how I approach the job post game, especially where, I think as everybody knows, I'm not locked in on every pitch when I'm at the game because I'm half writing the game story. It's going up at the end of the game. I'm also working on features for the next day or, whatever it might be. The kind of train never stops moving to sit down and sit back and watch the game. So if I miss something, I'm seeing the tweets or whatever coming in and be like, oh, we'll make sure to ask Cora about that. Or going to make sure. So that is, the lens through, I think all of us should approach this. So Devers Day, that beautiful Monday in Fort Myers. I think just, it's a double-edged sword a lot of the times. We're either, we are not asking the tough questions or we're asking tough questions and portrayed as, shit stirrers in a way. So that's kind of how I think, the public looks at it. With that, I think, you have to ask, what do you think about Bregman once he started digging his heels in? I felt like as a group, first of all, something I think the public misses sometimes is that we don't have a team huddle as the media and go into it and give all the questions together. I work for Mass Live. There's guys from the Globe, people from the Herald, EEI, local news channels in Fort Myers, people we don't even know, local news channels in Boston, ESPN sometimes, Nesson people, obviously, TC and Lou, EEI, Baseball Isn't Boring podcast, shameless plug for a rival. All those different people, we're all gathered around and we have no idea what's going to be asked. I think we have a general idea. And you get to just kind of react on the fly. And I think it's interesting. These things are now, live streamed. So, everything's so people can watch it, obviously live, especially during spring training. So once he started saying no, I think one of the things was, why do you have to ask him 16 times? Well, because we wanted to see how much he meant it, and he never backed down. He did a little bit in the one-on-one I did with him the week after, but he never backed down. And he never, really came off that stance. And so, the couple questions I asked him were, can you expand on that? What do you mean? And he looked at me and in English said, I play third. Couldn't be clearer to me than that he was pissed. The question I asked was and again, could I phrase this better? Probably, but isn't it their decision? Like, isn't it their decision where you play? As you're an employee, they're the employer. He said in Spanish, in part, no, it's my decision, which like speaks to me that there is somewhat of an issue there. And then the third one I asked, which I think people didn't like, was, okay, if you are not going to DH and they are not going to put you at third, then like, what's the outcome here? Like, are you going to, to me, it was like, oh, he's not going to retire and he's not going to take his ball and go home. And he's, like if he's unwilling to do what they're telling him, like, what does he want? Does he want to trade? And so that, came up, and no, I don't think he's going to get traded. And no, I didn't think that when I asked the question, but I think it was a fair follow-up. So it was definitely one of the more, I think, surprising media scrums in terms of how it went down. I did not expect him to dig in like that. It's interesting to cover for sure. I always love when athletes aren't boilerplate and they don't do the cliche thing. We see that now with Casas every time he talks, obviously. We've seen
love him so much.
More and more the last couple of years, and different players who are more thoughtful. Sale was like that because he'd say, like, I'm an embarrassment to my family after he pitched badly. But it was an interesting day. And I think, just to put a bow on where I think the situation is now, which is, I think, the big story still, the Red Sox camp, obviously. I'm not there right now. I'm in between stints. I think, it's not over. I think there's still, discussions to be had. I think it's clear what they want to do. They want Rafi to be their DH, and they want Bregman to play third, and they want someone else, probably Campbell, to claim second. I don't think they handled it perfectly as an organization leading up to when they signed Bregman. I don't think we're as upfront with Devers as they should have been. And like I said that day, I think his response was the one you'd want if you were the team. Like, no, it's my position. You can't just take it away. But now if he's still pissed and it lingers, you have a real problem on your hands. And I don't think it's resolved yet.
Do you think that I have a couple of questions going back to this, the conversation specifically. Do you think that Devers felt ambushed by the questions?
No, I think he was thrilled to be asked them, 90% of them, because he wanted his side out there, and talking to, I talked about this on our pod, the Fenway Rundown, subscribe, like, rate, the other day, that like, when I went up to him and I talked to him about for the one-on-one the week after, we're like, hey, can you clarify? Hey, what do you think? And the Globe ran a kind of similar story because Alex Spear talked to him right around the time I did. When I went up to him at first, it was like, how are your shoulders feeling? How does that feel? All this stuff. And he said, good. I'm going to get in the game next week. I said, okay. And do you know, are you going to be playing the field or just DHing? He's like, oh, I knew you'd ask that question. Here we go. And then the more we went on, it was the more he wanted to say. Like, I'd ask a question, the translator would give an answer, and Rafi would be like, and one more thing. And one more thing. I want to get this off my chest. And one more thing now that we're into it. Like he I think was excited to give his side of what was going on. It was 3 or 4 days after Bregman arrived. I think some of these narratives, especially talk radio narratives, are overblown. There's a thought or some theory out there that, number one, he left camp when Bregman was there, like went home. I think that was like 3-4 days before position players are supposed to come. So that's not a story and not really true. And the other one is that he's like boycotting playing in spring training games. Now he's just trying to get his swing right. Like, there are media narratives, I don't think, that come from the beat. I think they come from other places that are ridiculous. And so, it is the job of those who cover the team on a daily basis to kind of, shoot those down. But to answer your question, does he feel ambushed? No, I think he I think there were some questions he was surprised by, probably the trade one being one. The weight question, which I did not ask and got a lot of play, I'm sure surprised him in that setting. But I think, he was like, he went into it and he walked out, and at the end he was like, thank you guys, appreciate it, thank you guys. And he wanted people to know, like, he felt like he was sold a bill of goods here, and that's what happened. That's his read on it.
I will say that that was like a big part of, like, listen, I'll take full accountability for this. I was basically the Kevin Durant tweet, look at you, emotional. I was emotional, like, on that day. Like, especially when the opening question, and it wasn't you who asked us, obviously. I think it was Shaughnessy who wasn't asked, which is very on brand for Dan Shaughnessy to ask this question, to basically open up with the journalistic version of saying, hey, fatty, to start off a press conference. I was like, okay.
But that's not how it opened up. That was like 10 minutes into it. And I think the another thing that worked against the perception of this, as I tweeted that day, was the Red Sox stream, not for censorship reasons, no conspiracy theory. Like, he was supposed to be there, let's say 12:25. He sat down at 12:21. People were scrambling, people were getting over, and we did 3 minutes on shoulders. What do you think of the team? All that type of stuff. And then they started rolling, and people thought, "Oh my God, they're starting with this ambush." And it's like,
okay, see, that's a very important key
there.
piece of context. I legitimately did not know that.
Yeah. Well, that day, as I was writing my 8th story, and then I find myself on Twitter, like, I gotta respond to everybody. I gotta respond. It's like, this is really not the fun part of the job here. But you know what? We do it.
Well, why do you feel that you need to respond to people on Twitter about these things? I mean, it's, as you mentioned, you have access that the average fan doesn't have. You have access that, podcasters with an internet access, we don't have that. Why do you feel like you have to explain yourself to them?
I don't think I have to explain myself. I think that if I'm in a position where I have to hold these athletes accountable and ask them questions about the way they do their jobs, if random people or wonderful podcasters like you guys want to ask me the ins and outs of how things work, like, I think, maybe not owed that explanation, but I'm not going to hide under this big guise of like, we're the media because we said so. I think that's stupid, right? Like, the explaining how it works as much as we can, the explaining the kind of ins and outs. In that case, where I was putting out the audio of the first 3 minutes, it's because it obviously helped our cause of like making people understand it. But even if it didn't, like, I'd be, the interview started here. Like, my job is to work in the facts about the Red Sox. So I think people should have access to the facts about how they're covered too. Like, I don't really shy away from any questions unless they kind of, get into the deep reporting process and some of that stuff. That's just sacred ground, but that's a different level. I think people should, have an understanding of sometimes how this stuff works. I think, the how the sausage is made stuff, like, I just take for granted because I live it every day. I don't think the average fan really knows. And I also don't think, and this is just an indictment, I think, on the industry and the league, I don't think players have a very good understanding of how the whole thing works. I don't think that they lump us in with talk radio sometimes. I think they paint us all as the media at large. So if, like I always say, if somebody from a competitor were to piss somebody off in the clubhouse, that shouldn't, affect me. But they loop us all in sometimes. So yeah, it's kind of a, trying to just kind of show people like, hey, this is, first of all, it's sports. Like, we shouldn't take it that deep sometimes. I think that gets lost in Red Sox Twitter, obviously. But, just to kind of like show like, all right, no, this is real what happened. I'm going to try to explain myself. This is why I asked a trade question. Here's my thinking here. Because people care, and so that's why I try. It is a fruitless effort sometimes, most of the time.
Yeah, and I did appreciate your your logic made sense to me with why you that was your follow-up. But is there consideration to what the reaction to those questions are going to be before you ask them? And I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I guess my thought here is that I have seen so many just like bullshit thought piece articles about here are guys that we can that Rafi Devers is going to get traded for,
right?
And it's like Alex Bohm and a couple of other guys on the Phillies. No, not on Mass Live, but
that's where my control of the situation ends,
But you have to know that it's going to affect the entire, like, anything that you guys do, because you do have this megaphone and this like tape recorder with them. Anything that you guys do is going to end up affecting the entire ecosystem, not even just within Red Sox Twitter, but you have all of these other teams now, all of this stuff. And does this affect you? Not really. Is it probably good for clicks? Absolutely. But I am wondering if that's something that you consider going into it.
I think if the Rafael Devers trade question was about clicks, then we probably would have written a story with the words Rafael Devers in trade in the headline that day instead of the other 4 we did. It probably would have been in the podcast headline. It was not. We have not done a headline on that. If he demands a trade, it'll be a different story. I don't have control over how people aggregate things now. And I think that the sliding scale on how things are aggregated it's a complete Wild West out there, and it's getting worse by the day. I mean, I write, these prediction sometimes, like, here are 25 fun predictions for the 2025 Red Sox. And like, here's a prediction. I could see Rowan Anthony getting an extension out of the blue in spring training. It's somebody's like Red Sox insider predicts like mega extension coming. The headline, if I'm at like a 2 out of 100, the headline makes it seem like a 95. I can't control where the headline goes there. I can control, what I put out and what I ask. And like, if there are over aggressive and over dramatic aggregations, thinking up trade scenarios off a question I asked, that's again, not something that really I would have any control of. And the other thing is, if I didn't ask that question, anybody who's a sports fan and has seen anything play out before could take, 2 + 2 and get 4 out of, well, there's at least a small chance of that. So Devers says he's not willing to do what the Red Sox are asking him. Even if the word trade's not brought up in that press conference, I still think you see that, what could the Dodgers give up for him? What could the Phillies give up? Because tension, I think, breeds that anyway. But I think, to answer the question in a different way, I think it would have been irresponsible if no one in that media scrum asked him, well, what are you saying here? And I think he also would welcome that question, right? Like, he was not probably expecting it maybe, but, what if he wanted a trade? And the answer was, yes, that's the next step I want out of here. You don't know unless you ask. And so that's why you try to ask not leading questions, try to ask curious. With that one, as I tweeted, could I, if I had, 10 days to think about the fact that I would ask it, maybe I would have asked in a more open-ended, well, then what's next? But there's really not that many options when you think about it. It's retirement's not on the board and those types of things. So to me, it's the one path out if he wants it. I don't think he wants it quite yet, but I don't think it's 100% ruled out.
I completely understand, especially with your reasoning why you asked the question. I remember just at the time though, on the day of when the question happened, because I remember a couple years ago when Xander was asked to move off a shortstop, he was basically just as telling the Red Sox, go fuck yourself, as Rafi was. And I remember at the time, no one was asking Xander, hey, you want out? And honestly, that would have been way more valid at the time because Xander had a year left on his contract. I think.
But the difference is that they didn't want him to do that. So or they didn't ask him to, that was a hypothetical. At that point, this isn't a hypothetical. This is what they're going to do and what they want to do.
That's fair.
And also, as the point you were making before I so rudely interrupted you, the situation is different. If you want to re-sign Xander and you want to keep that relationship good, you're going to keep him kind of, placated at that point. With Rafi, it's we have you under contract for 10 years. If we want to move you, we can move you. And we dare you to make a scene about it. And that's, I think, what they have done.
They really did handle it very poorly, because everything we've heard about how they were talking to him in the offseason was basically all the rumors out there that we're going to move you off there, complete bullshit. Don't listen to it.
Right.
Talk about saying the media is making up narratives when in fact
right.
It's
well, you know what? I think something really, really interesting on that is, that whole thing even continued after Bregman signed. Passan gets nothing wrong, as you guys know. And he tweeted on the night that they signed Bregman, the widespread expectation from multiple sources is that Bregman will play second for the Red Sox. I'm guessing, and I don't play this game where I guess people's sources, but there's a real legit chance that that was true at the time. And then the next day they sat down, they said, all right, time to unleash kind of the hounds here. This is what it's going to be. Rafi, we got to have a conversation. And I think they kind of crossed their fingers and said, we hope it doesn't go poorly. And then the backdrop of that being if it does go poorly, what recourse does he have? If he's in the lineup at DH on opening day, none of this matters really. And if he produces, none of it matters really. But it's a headache for 6 weeks and it's a story for 6 weeks. And
it's one of those things where they could have just gotten this out of the way. He could have done his sulking at his farm at the fucking Dominican Republic. And we couldn't have ever, this could have just been a non-issue completely.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think, two other things I'd say about the way they handled the offseason with that. Number one, Cora repeated the same phrase. If we're going to have these conversations, the first person we're going to talk to about it is Rafael Devers. I don't think that really bore out. And then number two, what's all the talk about Alex Bregman being a Gold Glove second baseman if that's not the vision? Was that kind of a smokescreen? And, if it's they don't care. This was some elaborate ploy, and then they pulled the last minute switch because they think it puts them in the best position to win. Like there's a case to be made that how much can you fault them for that, right? That is the goal at the end of the day.
But see, that's what's weird to me because like you only seriously considered where you want to put everyone after you've acquired him. That's insane to me.
There's no chance that's the case, right? So it was a smokescreen otherwise.
Yeah, it's like obviously day one, it's like, okay, well, if we get Bregman, we want him to play third. And it's like, can't you just be honest with Raffy? Like he sees the headlines. You're trying to trade for Arenado. Arenado's going to come here to play first base. Are you insane?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing was, like this is one of those, like, this was a perfect example of like fans not believing this news was true because they didn't like it, but like they tried pretty like hard to trade Casas, like they
really
were willing to, and there was a lot of people in the game said like they're actively trying to, and I think maybe that's with this whole maybe they knew how upset Devers would be, and maybe he'd be better off if they wanted to put him at first, but they're not going to do that. Like I don't know, it's to me, it speaks to, and I harped on this for 4 months, and anybody who listens to our pod knows that Sean and I both did. Like, I understand Bregman is going to be a good addition and all that stuff, but like, doesn't Teoscar or even Tyler O'Neill just fit this roster a lot better? Like if you have, and I know Anthony's coming and Campbell can play left and all that stuff, but if from an offensive point of view, like I think another thing, I think that the mandate to improve the infield defense was what this is all about.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the infield defense still improves with Bregman at second base, regardless, though. Getting Bregman helps you out wherever.
And if Story could just stay healthy, for the love of God, even just give us like 120 games. Like, if Story played 120 games last year, the Red Sox make the playoffs easily. Like, I hammered the drum for a while that like there's an argument to be made we missed the playoffs because of that 1 week that David Hamilton was playing shortstop because we lost like 4 games.
I've been saying this. I've been saying that I feel vindicated on this because I've said it about Sale for so many years. Like all these injuries, like they do pile up, but they're not like TOS or like something that you're not going to rebound from. Like they happen and they're freaky and then they heal and then you should be fine. It was obviously until the next one with him. With Story, I kind of feel the same way. Like, he's not hurt. He's a fully healthy player. He's still pretty young. He's an athletic guy. Like there's nothing stopping him from being a good producer until the next injury, which comes out of nowhere. Like Sale flipped off his bike. Okay, he broke his wrist. Well, that wrist is going to heal, and now he's going to win a Cy Young. Like that's kind of how I looked at it. Me just exuding positivity at all times.
See, you think about injuries very similar to how I do, which is it's luck. Like so much of it it is luck, and like there's a very minimal few guys where it's like he's just going to be injured forever. Like Jacob deGrom in the modern era. The human body cannot handle pumping 102 every pitch. Please stop trying to do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's
just break.
And I would say pitchers and position players are a different case too. But you look at Sale, that stuff, we saw the pinky blow off at Yankee Stadium, the bike accident, and the one weird one was the rib cage, whatever that was during spring training. But like
that was weird.
Once he got healthy, he was good again, right? And I think the same, maybe the ceiling's not as high for Story as Sale on the position player side, but I think it's still there.
Sale was so frustrating because every time we saw him back for like 10 or 20 games, his stuff was still just as good. But then like some other like slip on a banana peel kind of injury would happen again. And it's just like, okay, he's snake bitten here. So yeah, I mean,
Going back to something that you mentioned earlier, Chris, that I thought was interesting. You mentioned it being kind of like the Wild West as far as social media and reporting goes these days.
Not reporting, aggregating.
But
aggregating
that was kind of what I was going to connect it to, though. Does the aggregation affect how you report news? And what do you tell? Because I know that you teach your class, which free drop, by the way, here if you want to tell people about your class. But what do you tell them about that? And I guess how to, get your name out there, because I feel like that's a way that a lot of people, or you see these followings that I'm not going to name any names, but some of them are better than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Red Sox fans don't know this really because I've been on the beat now for a few years, but like I was a burner aggregator to start my career when I was in high school and early college at Trade Deadliner. Rest in peace, it's gone now, but it was basically like an account on Twitter that was like plagiarizing, and then I like turned 18, 19 and realized like, no, you have to give credit and that's how this works. And like, you want to do it in the right way. And then I started trying to talk to people and trying to break my own news and work for MLB Daily Dish, again, rest in peace, and SB Nation and all these different places, and like was trying to, break news and trying to make a name for myself as an aggregator. That's what I was doing. But, there's a difference, I think, between, and I see this time and time again, and I'm not singling out specifics. I think there are some sites that do it better than others. Like, there are aggregators that if I say, again, I'll put it on that scale out of 10. If I say something that's at a level 1 out of 10, like here's a bold prediction, and a headline makes it look like it's a 9 out of 10 possibility, then if somebody clicks on that and says Chris Cotillo thinks the Red Sox are going to, I'll give you an example, one that I actually wrote. Bold prediction, I said that Yoshida gets DFA'd, I forget, either before opening day or May 15th.
Great take, by the
way. Bold predictions, I still wouldn't fully discount it, especially now with the Devers thing, actually.
No, 100%.
But like, do I think it's super likely? Do I think it's like 90% going to happen? No, but it's a bold predictions column. Everybody kind of, if you read the column, you have the idea of what it is, and the headline, in the body of the first paragraph, this is a fun exercise. This is somewhat informed. This isn't reporting. Like, you got to put up all these like guideposts for people, and then the next day it's like aggregate MLB Insider predicts Red Sox about to move on from $90 million man. There's nothing I can do about that. And I think the only thing that to me makes me nervous there is if you Google Red Sox and you click on that and you read that and not the original story, which a lot of people do. That's why people write them, because they get traffic. Then you're going to see, oh, Cotillo said they're about to cut Yoshida. That's not what I said. I had a bold prediction in a column of 26, 25, whatever it was. And so that's where I think it gets dangerous. I think it gets kind of, wild westy out there. And I think the other thing is Twitter, and I've tweeted this, and this is like old man yells at cloud thing, and talk about the workshop. And I teach a class at BC where we've talked about this too, like second best ACC school, by the way. The reason that Twitter is now more dangerous than ever, and what we're talking about, not big picture, is that, you get paid based on impressions. If you have that turned on, you don't get paid based on truthful impressions. So, there's a real, incentive financially. And I know it's only a couple dollars here and there sometimes. Sometimes it's more to either plagiarize or over exaggerate or, pump out narratives that are not true or get into whatever it is. That's just based on the interaction numbers and not the truthful numbers, which I think is a huge change in the playing field from when I was starting out, in those aggregation days, or when I was starting out on the beat. I still think Twitter's useful. I still think the audience is pretty big on there. And I still think the conversation, like I said, drives a lot of the questions that I ask, at least, and I wouldn't ignore it. But I wish the aggregations were, a truthful, encapsulation of what we report all the time. And like, I don't have the time, and I'm not enough of a jerk to be sending these people emails all the time. Like, hey, this is, there's been a couple cases where I've sent an email, been like, this is a real gross mischaracterization of what we had or what we said on the pod or things like that. Sean McAdams had it happen a couple times where he said something on the pod, and then you see this aggregation. It'll be like, I co-host this podcast. When did I miss that? Like, when did he say that? And it's completely not, because the sensationalism stuff drives it. So I think, that hurts the public perception of the beat, because you see all these aggregations, or, oh, this person said on here, this person said on here. And if you actually read it, like, we choose our words carefully. We know stuff, and if we know stuff to a certain level, we're going to report it as fact, not as a bold prediction on January 1st or whatever that was.
Well, so basically, Boston Strong actually has sources. That's the real.
If you want to have Ian Brown on, you can.
I love Ian. We've had him on before. I've made no secret of my love for Ian Brown.
Yeah, I had the workshop last night, and so I logged on and I saw like, oh, something's going on Red Sox Twitter, and I saw Ian Brown versus Boston Strong, and Boston Strong like said, he's drinking and tweeting. Like Ian is either doing like a dry 3 months or a dry 2025 right now. So it made it even funnier. Like he's like,
That's awesome.
you know, he didn't want to go out during spring training and like just, you know, there's an age joke to be made with him in here, but I'm not going to do it.
Twitter really, and you were making the point, it is brutal just because of how you said that misinformation is, you know, if not misinformation, borderline misinformation is very much rewarded. Like
Right.
that is the meta on Twitter. And it's basically since Musk took over, it's basically made the platform somehow even worse than what it was before.
I would say 2 or 3 times a week I log on to Twitter and I find out something that I reported or said that I didn't about the Sox. So it's always fun.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it on places that used to be more reputable. Like I'll get 3 to 4 times a week. My dad will send me over WhatsApp, hey, another bullshit article from Sports Illustrated. And you look at it in Sports Illustrated, which, you know, that was the magazine that was in the dentist and doctor's waiting room when I was a kid. Like they're just posting these aggregation stories.
And most importantly, a long lineage of like Tar Heel legends dominating SI from, you know, Gammons and a lot of other people too. It's just, you know what, it's hard to fault any individuals who are in that type of system because, hey, if you're going to get paid to write and you want reps and this is what they're asking you to do, this is what they're asking you to do. And like jobs are scarce. I see that. And I'm lucky to have mine and understand that with the workshop that I am doing and, you know, BC to a lesser extent, even though that's not all aspiring sports writers. Like you get the reps and you get the opportunity where you want them. And if your employer is saying you're going to lose this opportunity if you don't come up with 10 stories a day, then, you know, what are you going to do? So I can't fault the individual. I fault the ecosystem for coming to this.
Yeah. And I completely agree that it's not, my issue is never with any single person on this, but it is the system. And I mean, I remember when I was in journalism school, I graduated in 2011 and it was kind of like, okay, we know everything's going to be moving to the internet, but we're not entirely sure how that's going to happen.
Right.
And
I don't think anyone will ever be sure. You know,
no, I don't think that they've ever really figured it out. But I think that what this system has done of effectively being able to get your news from anybody you want to that's going to agree with your worldview, it's really eroded trust in people with more, I would say, respectable platforms like your own, like the Boston Globe, like the Herald, so on and so forth. And I guess that's like your perspective on this for me is so interesting because, again, A, you are working in that, you're working for one of these publications, and B, you're teaching a class about it. How do you approach it? I think I answered one of my own questions earlier with like, well, this is why I'm talking to people when they have questions about it. But I guess how do you approach that issue of trust? How do you make it so people that are reading this and can choose from anyone, they're going to choose to read Chris Cotillo over somebody that's just going to have their worldview reflected right back at them?
Yeah, I mean, that I would say, you know, that has been something I've noticed on the beat where you can kind of take this in whatever, you know, way you want. I think from a bigger picture standpoint, there is a huge type of thing where, you know, you're looking at people only believing news if they agree with it or it's a positive outcome, you know. And to me, that is a really kind of scary thing that we're starting to see where, you know, I remember my best case of this was a few years ago. We had there was a big day where everybody was freaking out because Devers, Eddie Romero visited Devers on his birthday in the Dominican, like it was a day in October. And like, it was clear that they wanted to sign him to an extension that winter. But at that meeting, no contract talks were held. They literally just brought him a birthday cake and said, hey, Rafi, we love you. And I reported, no, they just brought him a birthday cake. No extension is close. And Alex Spear reported, they just brought him a birthday cake. Nothing is close. And it was like, you know, I got the nastiest emails and DMs from people. They're going to sign him now. you're wrong because I don't want to believe this. And I remember sitting there on the press conference when they ended up signing him in January, and Eddie Romero, the assistant GM, said, yeah, this didn't really come close until, January. It started, back in October, we weren't even thinking about an extension. I was just in the Dominican to bring him a birthday cake. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, finally, we can put this one to bed. But that was kind of the first time I noticed, like, and the Casas trade rumor is another great example of that. Like the all winter. He's my favorite player, so they're not trading him. Like, no, like they kind of might, right? Like they, no, I don't want this guy. I mean, people didn't like the Chapman thing. That's a signing, so they know that's true instead of a rumor. But, I look at it through the prism of being like a UNC basketball fan. I wanted them to hire, or football too. I wanted them to hire Belichick because being a New England guy and how ridiculous that all would be. And of course it is. Like when there were reports in that process that like, it's falling apart. Or like yesterday, as a fan, I get a negative report. They're not going to be on Hard Knocks like we thought they were going to be. I read that from a reputable reporter, and I said, oh, well, they're not going to be on Hard Knocks. Too bad. It's not like I'm going to read that. No, that's not true because I don't want it to be. And I think that's kind of bled into even what I do, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it really is. It does. And I think that kind of just reflects the not knowing who to trust. Like, and you've seen this on the beat. You've absolutely seen your, like your Glenniel Garcias or whoever being like, oh yeah, source that so-and-so, like they're close to a deal. But you do have other reporters. This was something that I remember from the Devers story you were talking about. You had like Hector Gomez, who is reputable within certain fields. He is a reporter within like some of the Dominican players, reporting things that are counter what other reporters are saying. And you'll get that where you're just not sure this reporter's been right about this before, so why would they be wrong about this? This reporter's been right, so why would they? Maybe they just have different sources than this person. That sort of thing. It's hard to navigate. It's very hard to navigate as somebody that's just looking for information on their favorite team.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's just kind of part of what the, what the whole game is, I try as time goes on not to react to everything out there and to be like, all right, well, if my sources are not saying this, and also not to be the guy that I'm going to shoot everything down. I'm not going to shoot everything down. Like that's just because you come off kind of, again, like an ass when you do that. I think a lot of it needs to be like when there's news, we'll report it. And I think silence speaks a lot on some of that stuff. If there's reports that, I forget the Red Sox were signing maybe Yuli Gurriel or something last year that became everybody, well, why aren't you writing about this? No, because it's not true. I'm not going to put out a tweet that says like, hey, all these people are telling me that, that this thing is not happening. But it's, to me, it's just, you can't control what's out there sometimes. And if it's on the pages of Mass Live, then it's our responsibility. And if it's not, it's not. Like sometimes it's that simple. There's I don't think we see that too much on the beat, like the credentialed places that are there and the reporters that are there every day. I don't think we see a lot of, but you see a lot of you guys might remember Nolan Arenado was on the verge of getting traded to the Red Sox and about 4 weeks ago, right? And that was just not true. But there's also an echo chamber with that stuff. When that stuff starts spreading around Twitter, this person told me, so now I'm hearing it from a source. And even though that source is not a real person in the know, and stuff like that. So I do investigate every lead, and it starts with kind of a few years ago. I got a random DM from a guy about a major Red Sox news story and made 2 calls and confirmed that it was true and ended up breaking it. So I've learned that you never, ever discount anything. So I look into everything, but I don't respond or tweet or write a, takedown of this isn't true on everything. But silence, I think, speaks a lot. And I also think a lot of this stuff is so pressing in the off season where like the pressure is not the pressure, but the attention, the eyes are on us on the beat because we are the channel that, the fans are getting the information through. From April through September, you can get pissed at the play on the field and we just kind of are in the background. But the rest of it, it's like, well, you're not reporting what I want. There was like, people were mad that we reported that there was a split camp about Bregman in December. That was the case. Why do you think it took so long? Right. Like, so, not everything we do is going to be positive, or not everything we report is positive, because it's the real world, and not everything is positive that happens behind the scenes.
It also doesn't help, like in terms of a fan base, especially during this last offseason before Bregman got signed. It's just a fan base that like kind of has an open loathing for like the highest decision makers on the team. So like we're basically just like very cynically sitting there waiting, like, can we hear a fucking report that's good, positive, anything, please? No. Well, cool. I guess I go fucking fuck myself then.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that during the offseason is like, I think my thoughts on the interest kings thing kind of evolved over time. At first, I thought like every team checks in on every player. And one thing that works against the Red Sox and other big market teams is that agents and these players are willing to leak out that big market teams are in on them, because it does drive up their price. And that's just an objective fact. And the Red Sox, doing their due diligence and knowing they could afford every player, are going to check in on every player available. And they had many needs in the last few years. So did they check in on everybody from, Soto to the worst free agent out there? Yes, they probably checked in on, 75, 80% of people. And then the way it works out, like there's 30 teams and they're going to sign in different places. I think those retroactive things where like the Red Sox were not that interested or not that deeply interested, or their offer came up just short or their offer came up much short, I think that reporting is really interesting because it gives a window into what's next. When those hits are coming a lot and when those hits are coming frequently, it forms a narrative when they keep missing out. And at a certain point in my head, it became like, okay, they got to figure out how to negotiate. They got to figure out how to push these deals over the finish line. And obviously they got there this offseason with Crochet and Bregman. And I also was, and Breslow said this on our pod. I tweeted it a few times late in the offseason. As much as it was fun to jump on them for, late January and talk about how this offseason feels like a failure, and a lot of people were doing that, like, I think the time proved things out, and just the spacing where it took basically 2 months between Crochet and Bregman, or 2 months for them to make a roster move, like that hurt the public opinion, but they ended up getting the deal they wanted with Bregman. So it's just impatience. It's just a 24/7 news cycle, and you have 30 24/7 news cycles where there's no good development on your team. You're going to get antsy, but in the end, like they put their money where their mouth is, and here we are.
100%. I will say though that the annoyance like post like during that gap, it was a response to how the team had been operating the last 3 to 4 years, or maybe they do like one thing and then it's like, okay, but that's all we're doing. Like anything else,
right.
It's like a way they half-assed. There are ways to improve the team. Like I always point to the trade deadlines as like the A, B, and C examples of this. Where I remember during the deadline they got Danny Jansen, and I was like, well, that can't be the right-handed bat. If that's the right-handed bat, then that's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
And so everyone was like, oh, well, it's just a minor move. And then like they traded for like Paxton. I'm like, wow, that is like, like
That's
how he is a lefty. It's like the flex tape commercial, like where they use the tape to hold the boat together. It's like instead of the flex tape, you use just like regular old Scotch tape you could find at the office to hold the fucking boat together. And then not surprisingly at all, the boat fell apart and we all drowned. So like, it is impatience on one hand, but I will say I don't think the impatience was unearned from a lot of the more observant in the fan base. Just like, please prove us wrong. And they did. That's what makes me happy is they did prove us wrong. And it's like, hey, we're back to being a semblance of serious again.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I think, that's what the Bregman thing buys you more than, what he brings on the field and in the clubhouse. It brings you that credibility again. It took them too long to do it. Was it a perfect fit positionally? No, but at a certain point, do it. And they did it. And John Henry could smoke a cigar, and it was great for everybody in that moment, right? Like, that was a kind of a big turning point, big moment for fans, for the team, for everything. So the offseason has kind of evolved from, I remember in the offseason of 2018, they just come off the World Series. They made one 40-man roster move, and no one was complaining about that, right? Because
Brewer.
Yeah. But, like, in retrospect, Cora has said billions of times, like, 2019 team kind of came in complacent, and we should have made more moves. And so no fans were complaining they were bringing that same exact team back minus Kimbrel, right? So you never know. I think that now expectations are higher, and we'll see where it goes.
19 was the Andrew Cashner trade deadline acquisition year, right?
He yelled at me once in the clubhouse, so he made his mark in the 3 weeks he was there. I also have a great picture on my phone of some guy in a beer line at Fenway in August 2019 in an Andrew Kashner jersey, the one and only.
What a
That's amazing. That's like what I saw. I remember seeing a Doug Mirabelli jersey there like a year ago.
Well, he's been. I mean, that's this guy made like 5 starts. I mean, Mirabelli's kind of a cult hero, but Andrew Kashner is like
having any kind
was
of
it a Red Sox
Kashner-
Andrew Kashner jersey?
Yes.
Okay, well, that had to be like, was it his dad or something?
That had to be his family. Like who
the Zach Short jersey's coming next.
I need to get a Zach Short jersey just for the meme of it because he literally was here for 5 seconds. Did he play what 2 games? Maybe not even that. He might have played 1.
Yeah, no, he like new player comes and you talk about their role and you do the whole like, like, hey, welcome to the big leagues. What's it like? What's the journey been like? They're always on 3 Spirit flights and their wife flew in from, vacation in Mexico to see and all these crazy things that happen. And, like, okay, this is how Zach Short could fit in. You spend like a whole pregame writing that. And then like the next day is DFA. What a waste of time. But you never know because, what waiver claim could turn into be, Bernardino has been on the team for 3 years or, a minor league signing like Zach Kelly was useful or, good. And so you never know. You got to kind of pursue all those things. There are the one guy last year, that guy, Johan Ramirez, they had just to fill in there on the trade deadline game where they were short on pitching. He didn't get a Mass Live profile, but I think Smitty must have been asleep.
I will say, man, I'm looking at the Zach Short era, and I didn't remember correctly. 2 games, racked up negative 0.2 B WAR, negative 100 OPS plus. I gotta say, legend, Titan of the year.
Yeah, you need that shirt, dude. You need that shirt.
Gotta get the jersey.
I got a 2-part
Sacred Heart
question
alone.
for you here.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about how the Boston media market is different, and it's something that's not every player can handle it. So my question for you is, why is that? And then B, is it harder to be part of the media in Boston than in other cities?
I wouldn't be able to answer that second one because I've never done it. I do think that that's an antiquated take. I mean, for better or for worse, and I mean for worse, which is a like I'd say 60% industry reasons and 40% Red Sox interest reasons. Like a lot of road games now are the Globe and Mass Live at those road games, and so you have like Julian and me, or Pete Abe and me, or Pete Abe and Smith, and that's the big bad Boston media for a 7-game road trip. Like I think that's an antiquated, 20 years ago, you go to New York and there's 20, there's 10 traveling papers. They have beat writers and they have columnists and, all the kind of legends of the game who are around for a really long time. I don't think that, I don't think it's intimidating. I do think, where that reputation maybe holds up a little bit is, with something like the Devers thing, like we know that the level of care, I think, and again, I'm speaking for a group that's not a team. I'll say that again. I think we all kind of understand the burden and the responsibility that comes with the fact that there are so many people that care about this. That is not the case in other cities. And so you want to make sure that you are, giving them the most answers and the best answers you possibly can. And therefore, I don't think there's a lot of people on the beat that are afraid to ask the tough questions. And that I think is the culture of the Red Sox beat. I think it's the culture of Boston media. I don't know if it's the culture of other places. Like I just haven't worked in them. I do, I notice a big difference, like watching press conferences of like college teams and stuff. And like, it's just a little bit more communal in certain places. But again, I've said this and I'll say it all the time. It's a double-edged sword where like, if we can talk about the Devers example, we can talk about whatever example, like if you don't ask a certain question, it's why are you such a homer? And if you do ask a certain question, is why are you a shit stirrer who hates the Red Sox? And it's just a prism. And I get both all the time, which is a huge indictment on, I think, objectivity, right? Like if you're hitting both of those check boxes and you're in a really good spot. And there are, people around the country and around baseball who cover their team as homers. There are people that cover them as antagonists. I think either one of those is flawed. You don't want to be either. But, I think if you talk to players in the last, few years, and with the dwindling media core and the sad state of some of that in the industry and, other teams being more compelling, look, if you're if you're a big media organization in May or June, the last few years, or if you are WCVB or WBZ or any of these places, like you're going to send your reporters, your columnists, you're going to have your editors focused on this. You're going to send a cameraman and a reporter as a TV station to the Celtics, to their road games in the playoffs, to the Bruins, to their road games in the playoffs. Obviously, those are usually quick trips, but the Celtics one being like they're, contending for a championship. The Patriots were king for so long. It was the annual 2 or 3 playoff games, Super Bowl trip. And so, if you have X amount of money, you're going to save up for the Celtics championship run and 4 rounds of the playoffs, right? And like that means May and June, those people who cover a lot of sports are just not at Fenway. It's just a beat. This time of year for spring training, a team that, is just now kind of starting to maybe have championship aspirations, but has been out of the playoffs. Like you're not seeing the crowd you saw in 2018, 2019 down there. And I think, sports radio, there's a lot of reasons for that, but that you can see, they've said the names of random NFL draft picks more, the guys that we've never heard of and will never play for the Patriots more than we've heard the name Alex Cora in the last 2 months. And that's just, I think 20 years of Patriots dominance means that's just the rotation we get in, even though they're horrible, even though they have Drake May, who will, save the organization and all that. So,
Good.
Where is your gear right now? I usually you have like the North Carolina stuff on.
Yeah, no, I got the 2 Franklin Streets, the Main Street and Chapel Hill, and then Fenway. So my 2.
I guess I see. Yeah, there's something your shoulder was blocking, and I see it.
Yeah,
on the
yeah. No, I got the backboard, but I'm a little like they're on the bubble, which is not a place to be right now. But they got Duke on Saturday, so we'll see how it goes. Didn't go well last time.
I will say a lot of the negative reputation that like people associate with the beat is purely just the fault of Boston sports radio, like being in the same adjacent industry, because that genuinely is as bad as it's billed to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, those guys I have a good relationship with Tony Maz, and I don't really know.
I heard he's an all-time guy. I heard he's like a genuinely great guy.
Yeah, so like he, is a guy that, I did the baseball hour for a year, 2 years ago, where I was a contributor to that show and went in and did a few things in the studio with him. And like, I was in high school when Felger and Maz launched, or maybe middle school. So I've watched that and I have it on a lot. And today Felger's screaming about like, how come nobody's writing about Rafael Devers? Just can one of these guys get his head out of his ass and go up to Devers and ask him what he thinks of all this? And it's like, Alex Spear and I, separately, of course, like did one-on-ones where we went up to his locker and had long conversations with him a week ago yesterday. Like, what do you?
You ain't reading all that.
So exactly. So I texted Tony and I was like, do I need to print it off and mail it? Like, but it is what it is. It's entertainment. Some of it's entertainment. Some of it's journalism.
I remember, like, thing is like, because obviously I grew up in Iowa, so like I'm not, indoctrinated with, in terms of seeing radio every day. But I remember during the peak of the Patriots dominance, these motherfuckers every day somehow finding something new to bitch about and be negative about. And I'm like you guys are taken seriously? Like I hope everyone's watching this because it's entertaining. Like I really do hope so. But there are real people who like think this. And I'm like, it makes me lose faith.
Yeah, I mean it's a boring product from a lot of perspectives, if everything's going well. I mean, that's
truly everything back then was going about as perfect as it could be. There was a couple interesting stories here and there, but
I think that there's a misconception for some people that negativity and objectivity are the same thing.
Yeah,
and it can be hard. I think negativity is just a lot easier. I think that it's and I've said this to Hogdale a lot, that I understand why it's handled that way with talk radio. But that doesn't mean I have to like it, and that doesn't mean I have to listen to it. And it's just sort of it's the nature of the beast, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'd push back where like I just don't think, and I can't speak for them because I don't have their numbers in front of me, but I can tell you that our like audience numbers are, there's no correlation where negativity sells or positivity sells. That's a big theory you get all the time. It's like, well, if you write negative stuff, you're going to get more clicks. That's not true. They sign Alex Bregman, you're going to get a lot of clicks too, right? So, if they were to extend Crochet tomorrow and we had 4 stories on that, like that would also, people would be reading that, or if, you write about a player's charitable cause and it's a really well done story, like people read that too, and if Devers is mad at the Red Sox and you write a story on that, people are going to read that. News is news, and I think that whole idea that, oh, well, you're only writing this for clicks. I had another thing that came up, my job is to provide the news to Red Sox fans as fast as humanly possible, and I'm not employed by Twitter. And so I get up to...
Thank God you're not.
I know. I get up to the press box right after Devers was done, and the model at Mass Live is you get the story up as soon as you possibly can when news happens. So when Chandler Rome breaks the Bregman thing, it's like, I've had instances before where, I've been 10 minutes after news is broken and it's just like, feels like it's too late. And so I run up, I write the first edition of the Devers story and post it. And I had a couple comments that were like, you couldn't wait to get this out there, could you? It's like, no, that's literally the job. What do you want me to say? It's not, it's if Rafael Devers, said that he cannot wait to move to DH, we would have done that too at the exact same timetable,
I would push back with something you said a little bit earlier, though, and I'm not saying that you do this, so please don't miss.
Okay, yeah, just for the record, none of what I'm saying is wrong at all.
Love that. I respect it. Respect it. That's my existence. That's why I
live with. No, but I would say that with the difference between reporting negative news and reporting positive news, if you're going with whatever narrative you're going with, if you go with the negative narrative, nobody is going to be mad at you if you're wrong. If you go in with the positive narrative and then something like if you predict the Red Sox are going to win 97
the job's not about narratives, it's about the facts of it. And then you can take the narratives as you want it to. How can you spin Rafael Devers being mad at the Red Sox as a positive development for the Red Sox, right? Like they're facts of the matter. And that's, I think when you look at everything through like, oh, this is a narrative, that's what columns are for. But that's not what, when you read a news story, that's a news story. If there's a slant to it, then it shouldn't be.
Well, how would you go with the way that the Tristan Casas thing was reported, with him saying that the kids aren't ready to come up or whatever, where there were people, I saw people writing stories on that saying that he was dissing his teammates. I saw other ones that were saying, like, the Jen McCaffrey column on it was about, well, like he talked about how he works out with them and has a good relationship with those players during the offseason. So those are two completely different narratives that you're seeing from that, though.
Our story by Chris Smith, why Tristan Casas thinks Red Sox beautiful roster shouldn't include big three immediately. Tristan Casas didn't hold back Tuesday. First, he talked about Devers. Then he said Casas, top prospects Campbell, Anthony, and Meyer, known as the Red Sox big three, should all begin the year at Worcester. His reasoning had more to do with the veterans, not the readiness. Asked if he would put the big three on the roster, Casas replied, then quote, 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 quote. I mean, there's no spin there, and that's how you should write that. It's a news story. I mean, if you want to write a column off that and say Tristan Casas, which again, it's not my job, and I don't do that very often. We have Sean for that. And I don't think he wrote a column off Casas that day. He did definitely off of Devers. Like if you want to say Casas is being immature or Casas is doing it, whatever you want, like you can take that in whatever way it is. Like I'm just saying in a news story, there shouldn't be that narrative. You're writing it straight. You're writing the quotes and saying, take this for what it is. My general point, and I think the one I've illustrated a lot in the last hour, is like how people go with it after we report the news is really out of my hands. And if we frame it in a certain way that makes people think in a certain way, that there's a framing to it that was irresponsible, and I can think of there's probably been cases where I've gone too quick and that's happened, then egg on our face. But the goal is to avoid that.
Yeah, and I think you've done a very good job of making that point. Again, I'm not trying to frame this as these are things that you are doing, and I'm calling you out.
No, I know that.
It's just an observation within the ecosystem of things that happen, and it can be difficult for, I think, the average reader to tell the difference between what is a column, what is news, what is opinion. And
well,
I think that's where I get where a lot of my frustration comes from.
On masslive.com, if the author's name is in the headline, it's a column, and if not, then it's not a column. So that's a quick little trick. But no, I think media literacy is at an all-time low too. So
that is objectively true.
Yeah. So there's nothing, and I'm not saying you guys, but I think generally people don't, And that goes back to the aggregation thing of, like X becomes Y when X is X, and keep it there, not the platform. That was confusing, but you know what I mean.
Is it like that viral tweet where it's like Twitter's the only place where you could say I like pancakes, and it's like, oh, so you hate waffle? It's like, no, bitch, that's a completely different sentence. Like that's very evergreen sentiment.
Yeah, one of my favorite fan reactions was, I had an idea that I pitched to my editors last year that the week before Verdugo plays at Fenway, I'm going to go down to New York and just focus on getting him. I need one hotel night and the train, and I'll stay with friends for the rest of the weekend. Like, I'm going to go do work pregame, go to Yankee Stadium one time, and that's it. And then I'm going to get an interview, and I'll write it when I get back, and we'll have Verdugo's thoughts on playing against the Red Sox, his thoughts on the trade 5 days before he comes to Fenway and everybody else did it. It ended up kind of being a big story. He was really introspective, and he was good. He's such a good quote because he just lets it fly all the time, obviously. And I tweeted like, I misread the schedule with a picture of Yankee Stadium. The Sox were in Chicago, and people were like, "This guy's a Yankee sleeper agent." It's like, that's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, throw your hands up and be like,
That's
"No,
awesome.
Yeah,
yeah, okay, right." Like, I don't. I have, nothing against the Yankees. I just, too many of their fans are Duke fans, and that pisses me off. So, but they got Luka, so it's all right.
Yeah, Chris, I have a question that's kind of an interesting question because I was just thinking about this because I know obviously during games you're writing the story of the game as it's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking in free agency for premier free agents, do you have like an outline already of like the article written like for a guy that's basically ready to as soon as like they sign?
Yeah, I mean, we have pre-writes for certain guys that we think certain things that are going to happen. You risk them not. I remember when I had a pre-write of the Red Sox re-signing Bogarts, and then I had to change a lot of that when that happened that night. Like when Ortiz was either getting into the Hall of Fame or not, we had Ortiz is going to make the Hall of Fame and Ortiz is not going to make the Hall of Fame. But I find it like, I wouldn't have guessed they were going to sign Bregman, so I wouldn't have wasted half an hour putting that together in time. But
Sure.
the goal is for us to be, fast and accurate. And obviously when it breaks at 10:30, it's not PM. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. And you got to adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to be in the hell where like Ed Mix's free agency tracker. It's like, I'm going to pre-write an article for every single free agent.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's a
put
great
it in the Rolodex,
by the way. One of the better ones.
Appreciate that.
Wonderful. Ed, did we have anything else for Chris? We've been going for about an hour.
Yeah, no, I'm just very appreciative of you coming on. These are these like, or I don't want to say inside baseball conversations, but like the topic of journalism itself is something that I don't think gets talked about enough and how these things actually get reported. So we do really appreciate you coming on and answering questions that I don't think were especially easy. So
yeah, well,
nothing but respect.
The Justin episode is going to be 3 hours instead of one when that ever happens.
Oh my God.
It'll be just a lot of yelling,
I
think.
Well, he can listen to this as a prerequisite, and once he can pass like a Sporkle quiz on some of the things we talked about, and then we could try it again with him.
Yeah. This is the prologue. I like that.
Poor Justin. He wanted to be here too.
He
He's
did.
just like one of those like Justin's no good, very bad day, and we're just like a bunch of shit.
Yeah, he DM'd me. I get it.
Oh man. Well, again, Chris, thanks for coming on. Everyone, thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Pod by the River, where we're getting to the real nitty gritty about beat reporting now. This is what we do here. Real show, professional product that we put on here. Once again, presented by Beyond the Monster. Chris, did you want to plug anything real quick again before we
just
masslive.com
and the Fenway Rundown podcast. Easy as that.
Let's fucking go. Love to see it. Again, all of you, thanks for tuning in. Have yourselves a fantastic night. Go Sox.